Hey everyone, welcome back. Happy Wednesday. Today we're doing a vegan mozzarella cheese recipe. I have some naans in the fridge and I have some bruschetta that I made earlier this week, and I want to make some really simple little flatbreads, but I want some cheese to go with it, and so I'm going to show you today how to make a really simple vegan mozzarella that you can use on pizzas, just in any recipe that calls for mozzarella that you want to have sort of melty and stretchy. This is a perfect recipe to substitute for that. So let me show you what's in the recipe and then I'll show you how to make it. Oh. You want something to eat? Yes? All right then. Here's what you're going to need for the recipe for the vegan mozzarella. You're going to need some raw cashews. I buy mine at the bulk barn. Raw cashews that you've soaked. Some tapioca flour, tapioca starch. They're sort of interchangeable, those names here in North America at least. Some olive oil, some nutritional yeast, lemon juice, fresh or bottled, some miso paste, a light one if you have it, but whatever you've got on hand. Onion powder, garlic powder, and a little bit of salt. That is all we're going to need to make our vegan mozzarella. So like I said, this is a really simple recipe. I think you guys are going to really enjoy it. And cheese is always the thing that people have the most, have the hardest time giving up because it's so addictive. I totally get it. Having this sort of recipe, the nacho cheese sauce recipe that I've shared in another video, and this one really makes a difference. When I'm making lasagna, I will use this recipe for the cheese, the mozzarella part of that recipe, and it's really good. So I showed you the ingredients that we needed. I forgot to say that we also need some water. So into the jug of a high-speed blender, I have Vitamix, which is a very high-speed blender. Blendtec is also another one. I think the Ninja works really well. If all you have is a regular blender at home, you're just going to have to blend it a little bit extra time because we really want this to be nice and soft. So I have half a cup of raw cashews that I soaked. I just started them this morning when I got up and put it in here with hot water, covered it up, and let it soak for the rest of the day. Right now it's about 6 o'clock in the evening. So we're going to throw those in there. I have rinsed them, drained them and rinsed them. And now we're going to add 1 cup of water, a 1/4 cup of tapioca starch or tapioca flour. It's the same thing. It's the really finely ground flour, not the little tapioca beads, bubbles that you would use for making tapioca pudding per se. It's the same ingredient, it's just not processed the same. So we want to add that in there. Then we want 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, 1 tablespoon of olive oil. If you're oil-free, feel free to leave this out, but let's face it, all cheeses are a little bit oily, so that really does add to the mouthfeel of the cheese that we're making. 1 tablespoon of miso paste. Miso paste is fermented soy, and it gives a really delicious, cheesy, umami, salty sort of flavor to the cheese. Really important ingredient. You can find it in the cooler, usually where you find like the cream cheeses and butter and things like that. You will find miso paste. So I didn't say how much. 1 teaspoon of miso paste. And then 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast. Nooch. Talk about it all the time. You know what it is? It's deactivated yeast, not the kind of yeast you use to bake your bread. Again, it gives a real cheesy, umami sort of flavor to any recipe that you put it in. So here I have half a teaspoon of onion powder, half a teaspoon of garlic powder, and half a teaspoon of salt. Mozzarella cheese is salty, so that's why we're adding that. And that's all. So now we're just going to blend this up really, really well. Scrape it down once or twice, and then keep blending until it's absolutely smooth. You'll see a little bit of steam that started to come out if you're using a high-speed blender. That's because the high-speed blender blends so fast that it actually warms up the the food that's in there, that's okay. We're going to end up putting this on the stove anyways. But don't freak out if that's what you see. So you can see that that is very smooth, very liquidy. So now we're going to take it over to the stove, and we're going to put it in a saucepan, and we're going to heat it over the stove until it thickens right up, constantly stirring it. So let me show you what that looks like. Okay, so I'm just going to turn this burner on, nice and low. We don't want to heat it up too fast. And I'm going to pour the mixture in there. You're going to be surprised at how liquid it is at first, because it won't feel like it's going to thicken up. But trust me, that tapioca starch in there is going to make a big difference. It's really going to thicken this up. So be patient with it. Just have it on lowish heat and take your time, stirring constantly until it starts thickening up. I will speed up this process. Now it's starting to get quite thick and lumpy. Now you just have to stir a little bit faster because we want to get it nice and smooth. Maybe turn your heat down to the lowest setting. You could use a whisk, but then it's kind of hard to clean it out of the whisk. So we just keep scraping the sides and stirring. You can see how it's starting to get really thick. I'm going to turn my heat off. It will also solidify a little bit as it sits, especially in your fridge. And if you want it runny, just heat it up again a little bit in the microwave. It's not going to be exactly the same solid consistency as dairy mozzarella. And there are other recipes you can make that use agar, I think that's how it's called, or carrageenan or something like that to actually make it thicker. But I find that those ingredients can be difficult to find, a little bit fiddly to work with, and you know what? This one is just so good and so easy to use. So that's your vegan mozzarella. You can see how it's stretchy and it's delicious. And so now I'm going to show you how I use it when I make my naan flatbreads. So for a really simple dinner, snack, even if you're entertaining and you want to put out some flatbreads, this is a really easy recipe. I have some vegan naans here. It's this brand here. You can sometimes have a hard time finding vegan naans because traditionally they're made with buttermilk. So just read the ingredients. This one's very obvious because it says. So I have made some bruschetta, and this is tomatoes, onions, garlic, a little bit of dried basil, olive oil, and a little bit of balsamic vinegar. That's what I like in my bruschetta. You can buy pre-made, just whatever you have. So the first thing I'm going to do is just brush the naans with a little bit of olive oil. And this is mostly, well, it adds flavor, and then it keeps the naan from getting all soggy from the bruschetta. I was told it's pronounced bruschetta, but in North America, we've just started to call it bruschetta. I think that's what most people call it. But I was told by an Italian friend that it's supposed to be bruschetta. All right, so we've just brushed a little bit of olive oil on that. And now I'm going to scoop up some of the bruschetta, trying to drain a little bit of the moisture out. And put some on both. And spread that out. I've got my oven preheating at 400 degrees. It doesn't really have to cook anything. It just needs to get everything nice and hot and all the flavors blended, because there's nothing really that needs cooking here. The cheese will not melt exactly like dairy mozzarella. Like I've said before, the goal is not to replace it exactly. The goal is to make something that's delicious, that fits the same, that does the same thing, fills the same sort of need. Okay, so that is the bruschetta on there. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of the mozzarella on here. This is not very easy to sort of do, but I just like to almost drizzle it on, though it's already thickened and stretchy. We just want to get a little bit on our flatbread. Yes, it can be a little tricky to work with, but believe me, it's worth it because it is delicious. And if you don't eat dairy, whether you're allergic or you're plant-based vegan, this recipe really does come in handy for the dishes that you make. Like I said before, I've used it on lasagna. I've also scooped it on French onion soup, and then just put that under the broiler for a little bit, just to give you that. All right, so I'm just going to put a few chili flakes on here. This is optional. It all depends on how much spice you like on your flatbreads or your pizzas. And then a little bit of dried basil. If you have fresh, then obviously you'd want to put it on after it came out of the oven. I don't. So there we go. I'm going to put these in the oven and let them stay in there for, I don't know, about 10 minutes, I guess. I'll just keep an eye on it until it's looking kind of nice and bubbly on top, and then I'll show you what it looks like. The cheese will stay fresh in your fridge for about 4 or 5 days to a weekish. I've never tried freezing it, so I have no idea how that would work, or even if that would be a good idea. But I find things to put it in. Okay, so I'm just going to put this in my fridge. Actually, I'm going to let it cool down because we don't want it to get sweaty in the fridge because it's warm. And I will see you back here when the flatbreads come out. They're done. Let's get them out of the oven. Oh. That's the mozzarella recipe on a bruschetta flatbread pizza, just a naan. You could use this on a regular pizza crust, but this is what I make when I'm in a hurry. And, you know, I really don't feel like making peach crust, which I will be honest with you is most of the time. I kind of prefer naans. I sometimes will use pitas, just anything simple. I hope you try this recipe. It's really good. And like I say, it fills that need of something stretchy and something that's got a nice cheesy flavor. Let me know if you try it. I would love to know what you use it in. Send me pictures. I would love that on Instagram. I'll talk to you next week.